The Great Hall of Nexus Prime Station could hold 10,000 beings. Today it held less than 300. But those 300 represented the most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. They had gathered to decide the fate of 80 million souls. Ambassador stood at the central podium. His thin body trembled as he spoke. They were not built for confrontation. They were small creatures with soft gray skin and large dark eyes. Their hands had evolved for delicate work. Their voices carried gentle harmonics meant for singing, not for begging. But today was begging. The stellar anomaly expands faster than our scientists predicted, he said. His translator device converted his musical speech into flat galactic standard. We have 17 days, perhaps less. Our ships can carry maybe 2 million people. We need your help to save the rest. The hall remained silent. Representatives from dozens of species sat in their designated sections. Some looked at their data screens. Others whispered to their aides. A few simply stared at the ceiling as if the ambassador was not even there. Continued. We are not asking for permanent homes. We only need temporary shelter, a few years at most. Our scientists have identified 3 worlds we could terraform. We just need time, please. We have children, we have families. We have done nothing wrong except exist too close to a dying star. The delegation shifted in their seats. There were tall beings covered in thick scales. They controlled vast territories and commanded the largest fleet in the Concord. Their senior representative, a battle-scarred warrior named, stood up slowly. They have reviewed the petition, said. His voice was deep and cold. We sympathize with their situation. However, our resources are currently committed to border security operations. We cannot spare ships or supplies for an evacuation of this scale. We must abstain from this vote. Felt his heart sink. He had expected this. The never helped anyone unless there was profit or power to gain, but he had hoped. He had allowed himself to hope. The spoke next. They were elegant beings with silver skin and 4 arms. They prided themselves on their ancient culture and sophisticated politics. Their ambassador rose with practiced grace. The Dominion has carefully considered this matter, she said. While we feel great compassion for the people, there falls outside our jurisdictional sphere. Providing aid would set a problematic precedent. Other species might expect similar assistance in the future. We must vote no. The merchant guilds came next. Their representative was a round creature from a species that had no name other than trader. He smiled as he spoke, but there was no warmth in it. The guilds would be happy to provide evacuation services, he said. Our cargo vessels are fast and efficient. However, we must discuss payment. Current rates for emergency transport would be approximately 14 million credits per ship per day. At the scale they require, the total cost would be roughly 800 billion credits. Does the Treasury have these funds available? Shook his head slowly. They were not a wealthy people. They were artists and scientists. They built beautiful things and asked for little in return. Their entire planetary economy was worth perhaps 50 billion credits. I thought not, the trader said. Then the guilds must also decline. We wish them the best of luck in their endeavors. One by one, the great powers of the galaxy found reasons to say no. The Crystalline Collective cited energy conservation concerns. The Hive Confederacy claimed their ships were incompatible with non-Hive passengers. The Order of Silence simply said nothing at all, which was their way of refusing. In the observer section, far from the main floor, a small human delegation watched in growing disbelief. There were only 3 of them. Humanity had joined the Galactic Concord just 8 years ago. They had no voting rights. They had no voice in these proceedings. They were here only to watch and learn. Ambassador was a woman of 50 years with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had spent her career in diplomacy. She had seen nations argue over resources and power. She had watched politicians make cruel calculations about who deserved help and who did not. But she had never seen anything quite like this. "They're going to let them die," she whispered to her aide. 80 million people, and they're going to let them all die." Her aide, a young man named David, looked at his data pad. "They have no strategic value, no rare resources, no military power. To the conquered, they're just noise." Watched as the final vote was called. The motion to provide emergency aid to the failed by a margin of 212 to 6. Only the smallest and members of the conquered had voted yes. Their votes meant nothing. The session ended. Delegates began to file out of the hall. Many were already discussing their dinner plans or upcoming trade negotiations. The crisis was already forgotten. It had never really mattered to them at all. Remained at the podium. He did not know what to do. He had come here with hope. He had believed that the galaxy would not simply watch his people die. He had been wrong. Stood up from her seat. Her aide grabbed her arm. "Ambassador, what are you doing? We have no authority here. We can't make promises we can't keep." Looked at him with hard eyes. "David, I'm not going to sit here and watch this happen. Get me a secure channel to Earth Command. Priority Alpha." She walked down the long stairs toward the main floor. The few remaining delegates glanced at her with confusion. Humans were barely worth noticing. They were newcomers with a small fleet and a single home system. They had nothing to offer. Saw the human approaching. He had read about humans in the cultural databases. They were strange creatures from a harsh world. They ate the flesh of other animals. They had fought countless wars among themselves. They were considered primitive by galactic standards. Stopped in front of him. For a long moment, she simply looked at this small gray being who had just watched his people receive a death sentence. Then she spoke. "Ambassador, my name is. I represent the United Human Federation." "I know who you are," said. His voice was hollow. "You are the newcomers, the observers. You have no vote here." "No," agreed. "We don't, but we heard you, every word, and I want you to know something." She reached out and took his small hand in hers. The gesture seemed to startle him. "Give us 3 days," said. "Don't lose hope yet. Give us 3 days." Stared at her. He did not understand what this human was saying. What could humans do? They were nobody. They had nothing. They were just another small species trying to survive in a galaxy that did not care. But there was something in this woman's eyes, something fierce and bright, something that looked almost like anger. Not anger at him, anger at the empty hall around them, anger at the delegates who had walked away, anger at a galaxy that could watch 80 million people die and call it policy. 3 days, repeated. What happens in 3 days? Smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone about to do something impossible. "In 3 days," she said, "you're going to see what humans are made of." She released his hand and walked toward the exit. Her aide hurried to keep up with her. "Ambassador, Earth Command is on the line. What should I tell them?" Did not slow down. "Tell them to wake up the president. Tell them to call every ship captain in the fleet. Tell them we have 17 days to save a species." She paused at the door and looked back at the empty hall one last time. "And tell them that the galaxy is watching. It's time to show them who we really are." The message reached Earth at 3 in the morning, Geneva time. Within 15 minutes, lights were turning on in government buildings across the planet. Within an hour, the president of the United Human Federation was sitting in the Situation Room with every military commander and logistics expert they could gather. Ambassador's face filled the main screen. She looked tired but determined. 80 million people, she said. 17 days. The Galactic Conquered has abandoned them. No one else is coming. Admiral James leaned forward. He was a tall man with decades of experience in deep space operations. His face was lined with concern. "Ambassador, I understand the moral urgency, but we need to be realistic about our capabilities. The Federation has a total of 412 space-worthy vessels. Half of those are small patrol craft. We don't have the capacity to move 80 million people across interstellar distances in 17 days. Then we need to find that capacity, replied. What do we have? Everything. I want to know about everything that can fly. The logistics officer, a woman named Colonel, pulled up a display. Numbers and ship classifications scrolled across the screen. If we strip every available military vessel, we can transport approximately 8 million people, she said. If we add civilian cargo ships, mining vessels, and research craft, we might reach 15 million. That still leaves 65 million people with no way off that planet. The room fell silent. The math was brutal and simple. They did not have enough ships. President stood up. He was a quiet man who rarely raised his voice, but when he spoke, people listened. What about the generation ships? He asked. Everyone turned to look at him. The generation ships were humanity's great dream. 5 massive vessels designed to carry millions of people to distant stars. They were still under construction in the orbital shipyards above Earth. None of them were complete. The chief engineer doctor shook her head. Sir, the Horizon and the New Dawn are only 60% complete. They don't have functioning life support for their full capacity. The drive systems haven't been tested. If we try to fly them now, we could kill everyone aboard. Could they fly? The president asked. Not perfectly, not safely, but could they physically make the journey? Doctor was quiet for a long moment. Maybe, if we install emergency life support modules, if we use them at reduced capacity, if nothing goes wrong. She paused. That's a lot of ifs. How many people could they carry at reduced capacity? 20 million each, maybe more if we pack them tight. Admiral ran the numbers in his head. 15 million from the regular fleet, 40 million from the 2 generation ships. That was 55 million, still not enough. But it was closer. We need more ships, he said. We need to ask for help. Colonel pulled up another display. There are human colonies on 12 worlds and moons. Most have local transport vessels. Mining operations on the asteroid belt have cargo haulers. If we called in everything, we might add another 10 million capacity. Do it, the president said. Send the call to every colony, every station, every ship that can fly. Tell them what's happening. Tell them we need volunteers. The call went out within the hour. It traveled at the speed of light to every human settlement in the solar system and beyond. It was not an order. It was a request, a plea. And humanity answered. From Mars came 32 cargo ships that had been hauling ore. Their crews voted unanimously to change course. From the Jupiter stations came research vessels designed to study gas giants. Their scientists packed their equipment and made room for passengers. From the asteroid belt came miners in ships held together with patches and hope. They had heard the call and they were coming. On Earth, volunteers lined up at spaceports. They were doctors and nurses, engineers and teachers. They had no idea what they would find at Prime. They only knew that people needed help and they could not sit still. Doctor worked for 3 days without sleep. She pushed the Horizon and the New Dawn through emergency modifications. Her teams installed temporary life support pods. They reinforced hull sections that had not been meant to carry weight. They prayed that the engines would hold. When the Horizon launched for its first test flight was at the controls herself. The massive ship groaned as it accelerated. Warning lights flashed across the console, but it flew. It was ugly and dangerous and held together by determination, but it flew. She'll make it, reported. Don't ask me how, but she'll make it. 7 days after Ambassador made her promise, the first human ships arrived at Prime. Stood at the observation window of the planetary defense station. He had not slept in days. He had watched the stellar anomaly growing larger each night. He had calculated how many of his people would die. He had written farewell messages to friends he would never see again. And then the ships came. They came out of hyperspace in waves, first 10, then 50, then hundreds. ships of every size and configuration, military cruisers and cargo haulers, mining vessels and passenger liners, two enormous generation ships that looked like floating cities. Each ship had painted something on its hull, words in the language carefully translated. The words read, "You are not alone." Watched the fleet spread out in orbit around his world. Tears ran down his gray face. He did not try to stop them. The first shuttles launched within the hour. Human crews in environmental suits stepped onto soil for the first time. They carried supplies and medical equipment. They set up processing centers and organized evacuation routes. They worked with quiet efficiency, as if they had been doing this all their lives. A human woman approached. She wore a captain's uniform and had kind eyes. "Ambassador, my name is Captain Sarah Collins. I'm here to help coordinate the evacuation. Can you tell me about your people's needs? Any medical conditions we should know about? Any cultural considerations?" Blinked at her. You actually came." "Of course we came," Captain Collins said. "Now let's get to work. We have a lot of people to move and not much time to do it." The evacuation began. Human crews worked in shifts around the clock. They carried children in their arms. They helped elderly onto shuttles. They moved families gently and carefully, making sure no one was separated. They were afraid at first. These humans were strange and loud. They smelled different. They moved with a strange intensity. But they were also patient and kind. They learned names and used them. They asked about customs and tried to respect them. When a young child began to cry, a human crew member sat down beside her and sang. It was a simple song, a lullaby from Earth. The child did not understand the words, but she understood the feeling. She stopped crying and listened. Across the planet, scenes like this repeated themselves. Humans and working together. Strangers becoming helpers. Fear slowly turning into trust. Back on the defense station, watched the operation unfold. Beside him stood who had traveled with the fleet. "Why?" asked. "You owe us nothing, we have nothing to give you. Why would you do this?" Looked out at the planet below. The shuttles rose and fell like small stars. "Because someone needed help," she said. "Because we could. Because when we look at your children, we see our own children. Because this is what being human means." Did not fully understand, but he was beginning to. "The galaxy thinks we are weak," he said. "They think you are weak too." Smiled. "Let them think what they want. We know who we are." Outside, the anomaly continued to grow. The clock was ticking, but the ships kept coming and the people kept moving, and hope was still alive. On the 12th day, the stellar anomaly accelerated. Doctor stared at his sensors and felt his stomach drop. The calculations were clear. The anomaly was expanding faster than predicted. They had lost 3 days. Instead of 5 days remaining, they now had only 2. 30 million were still on the planet. All ships, he broadcast on the emergency channel. "We have a situation. The timeline has changed. We need to move faster." The response was immediate. Ships that had been making careful, organized runs began launching with barely any time between flights. Crews that had been working 16-hour shifts pushed themselves to 20 hours. Captains cut safety margins they had been taught never to cut. Captain commanded the cargo vessel Rising Star. She was the daughter of Doctor, the engineer who had made the generation ships fly. Like her mother, she had a gift for making impossible things happen. The Rising Star was making its 19th evacuation run when the call came from the surface. 3 other ships had been caught at low altitude when the anomaly released an energy pulse. Their engines were damaged. They were stranded with 12,000 aboard. "Rising Star, this is ground control. We need immediate assistance at coordinates 73 Alpha. 3 vessels down. Their captains report engine failure. The anomaly's radiation is increasing. They have maybe 6 hours before it becomes lethal." Looked at her navigation officer. The coordinates were close to the anomaly's edge. The radiation levels would be dangerous even for a healthy ship. "How many people?" she asked. 12,200 human crew. Did not hesitate. Set course for 73 Alpha, maximum speed. Her first officer, a man named, grabbed her arm. "Captain, the radiation at that distance will damage our systems. We might not be able to take off again." "Then we'd better work fast," said. "Those people are not dying today, not on my watch." The rising star changed course. Around it, other ships continued their work, racing against a deadline that kept getting shorter. In orbit, the two generation ships swallowed passengers by the thousands every hour. The horizon was so full that people were sleeping in corridors and cargo bays. No one complained. On the surface, the evacuation centers worked with desperate efficiency. Human volunteers ran through the streets, making sure no one was left behind. They checked homes and shelters. They carried those who could not walk. They refused to leave anyone. A young human doctor named Amir was working at the main medical station when an elderly was brought in. The old one was having trouble breathing. The stress of evacuation had triggered some kind of cardiac event. "We need to move him," one of the evacuation coordinators said. "The shuttle is leaving in 10 minutes. Looked at the old. Moving him now could kill him, but leaving him behind would definitely kill him. "Get me a portable life support unit," said. "I'm going with him." "Doctor, you're supposed to stay at the medical station. There are other patients coming." "Then someone else will have to handle them. This patient needs me now." Carried the portable unit onto the shuttle himself. He sat beside the old for the entire flight, monitoring his vitals, adjusting the medication, keeping him alive. When they reached the horizon, he handed the patient off to the ship's medical team. The old grabbed his hand before he could leave. "Why?" the old one whispered. "I am nobody. I am just an old singer whose voice has faded. Why would you do this for me?" Squeezed his hand gently. "Because every life matters, yours as much as anyone's. Now rest, you're safe." He took the next shuttle back down to the surface. There were more patients waiting. The rising star reached the stranded ships just as the radiation alarms began to scream. Captain ignored them. She maneuvered her vessel alongside the first damaged ship and extended docking clamps. "Begin passenger transfer," she ordered. "Move them as fast as you can." The evacuation was chaos. Families stumbled through connecting tunnels, carrying whatever they had managed to grab. Human crew members guided them, shouted directions, lifted children over obstacles. The radiation counter climbed higher with every passing minute. They emptied the first ship, then the second. When they reached the third, the rising star's own engines began to falter. "Captain, we're losing power," reported. "If we take on any more passengers, we won't be able to lift off." Looked at the readings. 4,000 were still on the third ship. Her vessel could maybe carry 2,000 more and still fly. "Transfer the passengers from the third ship to ours," she said. "All of them." "Captain, the math doesn't work. We can't." "Transfer the passengers. Then jettison all non-essential cargo. Emergency supplies, spare parts, everything that isn't bolted down. We'll make room." The crew worked with frantic speed. They threw equipment out of airlocks. They crammed into every available space. They put children in storage lockers that had been emptied of their contents. It was uncomfortable and undignified, and nobody cared. When the last was aboard, the rising star weighed far more than it should. The engines groaned with the strain, pushed the throttle forward and prayed. The ship rose slowly, too slowly. The radiation was getting worse. Warning lights covered every panel. "Come on," whispered. "Come on, you beautiful machine. One more flight, just one more." The rising star climbed. Meter by meter it clawed its way toward orbit. The hull temperature rose. The engine noise became a scream, but the ship kept climbing. They broke free of the atmosphere just as the engine failed completely. "All stop," reported, his voice shaking. "We're in orbit. Engines are dead, but we're in orbit." Slumped in her chair. Around her, crew members were crying and laughing and hugging each other. In the passenger compartments, 12,000 were alive because one ship and one crew had refused to give up. The final count came on the 17th day, just as the stellar anomaly consumed Prime. 79,200,000 had been evacuated. Out of 80 million, less than 1% had been lost. Most of those had died from medical conditions that could not be treated in time. Some had refused to leave their homes. A few had simply been too far from evacuation points when time ran out. It was not perfect, it was not everyone, but it was a miracle nonetheless. The human fleet limped away from the dying system. Ships that had been pushed beyond their limits needed repairs. Crews that had worked without rest needed sleep. The two-generation ships carried 45 million passengers between them, packed so tight that movement was nearly impossible. But they were alive. Against all odds, against all expectations, they were alive. Captain never made it back. The Rising Star had been too damaged to continue. When rescue ships arrived, they found her alone on the bridge. She had sent her crew off in escape pods to make room for more passengers. She had stayed behind to keep the ship stable while they evacuated. Her final transmission was recorded and sent back to Earth. "This is Captain of the Rising Star. Mission successful. All passengers safely transferred. I am staying with my ship. Please tell my mother I did what she taught me. I made the impossible happen." When the message reached Earth, Doctor listened to her daughter's voice one last time. Then she went back to work. There were still ships to repair. There were still people to help. There was still work to be done. That was the human way. The Galactic Concord called an emergency session 30 days after Prime died. The Great Hall of Nexus Prime was packed. Every species that mattered was there. Every species that thought they mattered was there too. News of what the humans had done had spread across the galaxy like fire. No one could ignore it any longer. Ambassador stood at the central podium again, but this time he was not begging. He was not trembling. He stood straight and spoke clearly. 30 days ago, I came to this hall asking for help, he said. You refused. You told me your resources were stretched. You told me my people were outside your jurisdiction. You told me that helping us would set a problematic precedent. He let the words hang in the air. Around the hall, delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Then the humans came. They had fewer ships than any major power in this room. They had less experience with deep space operations. They had no obligation to us under any treaty or agreement. They came anyway. Paused and looked around the hall. His dark eyes met the gaze of delegate after delegate. 79 million of my people are alive today because of humans. They stripped their fleet. They sent ships that were not ready to fly. They worked without sleep for 17 days. One of their captains gave her life to save 12,000 she had never met. His voice grew stronger. And where were you? Where were the mighty and their vast fleets? Where were the sophisticated with their ancient culture? Where were the wealthy merchant guilds with their cargo ships? You were here, discussing dinner plans, calculating costs, protecting your precious precedents. The delegate rose from his seat. They should be grateful for the assistance they received. There is no need to insult those who made different calculations about risk and reward. Risk and reward, repeated. Is that what you call it? My people were dying. 80 million souls were facing extinction, and you calculated risk and reward. Ambassador sat in the observer section. She watched the exchange without expression. Beside her, David leaned close. "They look furious," he whispered. "We've embarrassed them in front of the entire Concord." "Good," said quietly. "They should be embarrassed." The ambassador rose next. She spoke with careful precision. "The Dominion wishes to offer our congratulations to the Human Federation for their successful humanitarian operation. We also wish to propose a motion. Given the changed circumstances, the Dominion offers to provide the with temporary settlement rights on the colony world of 7. This offer is made in the spirit of galactic cooperation. Shook his head slowly. The offer comes 30 days too late. When we needed help, you voted no. Now that humans have done the work, you offer cooperation. Why? What has changed? Circumstances have evolved, the ambassador said smoothly. The Dominion believes in adapting to new realities. The new reality is that humans showed you what real civilization looks like, replied. And now you want to pretend you were on the right side all along. The hall erupted in noise. Delegates argued with each other. Some shouted accusations. Others demanded order. The Speaker of the Conquered called for silence 3 times before the noise died down. Stood up, the hall fell quiet. Everyone wanted to hear what the humans would say. Distinguished delegates, began. Humanity did not save the to embarrass anyone. We did not do it for political advantage. We did not do it to prove a point. We did it because people were dying and we could help. She walked down toward the main floor, just as she had done 30 days before. When I first came to this hall, I was just an observer. Humanity had no vote. We had no voice. We were nobody, but we watched. We listened. We saw how this Conquered operates. She stopped in the center of the floor and turned slowly, addressing the entire hall. You have rules and procedures and jurisdictions. You have calculations about strategic value and resource allocation. You have a system that has worked for thousands of years, but somewhere along the way, you forgot something important. Pointed at. This man came to you begging for his people's lives. He offered everything his species had, and you told him no. Not because you couldn't help, because helping wasn't convenient, because helping didn't fit your calculations. The hall was completely silent now. Humanity is new to this galaxy. We have a lot to learn about interstellar politics and trade and diplomacy, but we already know one thing that you seem to have forgotten. People matter, not because they're useful, not because they have something to offer, just because they're people. Stood again. Pretty words, human, but the galaxy is not run on sentiment. It is run on power and resources and practical necessity. Your little rescue mission was impressive, but it changes nothing about the fundamental realities of galactic politics. Looked at him calmly. Does it not? Then why are you so angry? Snarled but said nothing. Let me tell you what I see, continued. I see a hall full of powerful species who are suddenly very uncomfortable, because somewhere out there, a small newcomer species did something you all said was impossible, and now everyone is asking the same question. If the humans could do it, why couldn't you? She smiled. It was not a friendly smile. You're not angry at us for embarrassing you. You're angry at yourselves for proving that you could have helped and chose not to. That anger belongs to you. Don't put it on us. The session continued for hours. The Merchant Guild suddenly offered free transport for refugees. The Crystalline Collective volunteered energy supplies, even the grudgingly committed ships to patrol the refugee fleet. It was all too late. Everyone knew it. The offers were made to save face, not to help, but they accepted them anyway. They needed the resources. They could not afford pride. After the session ended, approached in the corridor. You have made enemies today, he said. His voice was low and dangerous. The Conquered has long memories. Humanity's little moment of glory will be forgotten, but the embarrassment you caused will not. Looked up at the towering warrior. She did not flinch. Then let them remember this too. When we saw people in need, we helped. When you saw people in need, you looked away. History will judge which choice was right. Leaned closer. History is written by the powerful, and you are not powerful. Not yet, agreed, but we're learning and we're not alone anymore. She walked away without looking back. In the weeks that followed, something unexpected happened. Small delegations began arriving at human embassies across the galaxy. They came from species no one had ever paid attention to. The Eth, a peaceful people who had been pushed to the edges of their own territory. The whose colony worlds had been exploited by merchant guild contracts. The who had been ignored by the conquered for so long they had stopped asking for help. They all had the same question. They had seen what humans did for the. Would humans help them too? Met with each delegation personally. She listened to their stories. She learned about their struggles, and she began to see a pattern. The galaxy was full of forgotten species, peoples who had been pushed aside, exploited, or simply ignored. The great powers of the conquered had built their empires on the assumption that the weak did not matter, but the weak had been watching, and now they were looking for something new. Something that looked a lot like hope. 1 year after the evacuation of Prime, a new station opened in a distant corner of the galaxy. The station orbited a world called New. Humans had helped terraform it. What would have taken the 50 years alone had been accomplished in 8 months with human technology and human labor. The planet was not as beautiful as their old home. The skies were a different color. The forests were still young, but it was theirs. The station was called Haven. It was the first permanent structure of something new, something that had never existed in galactic history before. The compact of equals. 12 species had joined so far. There were founding members. So were the Eth, and the. Other species followed. The crystalline fragments, a splinter group that had broken from the collective. The green singers, plant-like beings who communicated through chemical signals. The deep swimmers who lived in ocean worlds and had never been taken seriously by land-dwelling galactic powers. And humanity, always humanity, not as leaders, not as rulers, just as partners. The compact had simple rules: no hierarchy, no tribute, no species above another. When one member needed help, the others would provide it, not because of contracts or calculations, because that was what the compact was for. Ambassador stood at the podium of Haven's Great Hall. The room was smaller than the Concord's meeting chamber. It was simple and functional. There were no elaborate decorations or displays of wealth, just seats arranged in a circle so that every delegate could see every other delegate's face. 1 year ago, I made a promise to Ambassador. I told him to give us 3 days. I told him we would show him what humans were made of. She paused and looked around the room. Faces of every shape and color looked back at her. Some had eyes, some had sensors, some had organs she could not even identify. All of them were listening. I think we kept that promise, but the truth is, we didn't do it alone. Every human who volunteered, every ship that changed course, every crew member who worked without sleep, they made that promise real. And now, 1 year later, we've built something I never imagined possible. Sat in the delegations section. He looked healthier than he had a year ago. The desperate fear had left his eyes. In its place was something quieter, something that looked like peace. The Galactic Concord has watched us carefully this year, continued. They expected us to fail. They expected our little alliance to collapse under its own weight. They expected the forgotten species to stay forgotten. She smiled. They were wrong. The hall filled with sounds of agreement. Different species made different noises, clicks and whistles and rumbles and songs, but the meaning was the same. The Conquered still controls most of the galaxy's resources. They still have the largest fleets and the oldest civilizations. On paper, they are still more powerful than us. But power is not just about ships and territory. Power is also about what people believe. And more, the galaxy is starting to believe in something different. Stepped away from the podium and walked toward the center of the circle. When I first came to the Concord as an observer, I asked myself a question. What does humanity have to offer to this galaxy? We were newcomers. We had nothing that the great powers wanted. We were nobody. She stopped in the center and turned slowly, meeting every eye in the room. Now I know the answer. What we offer is this: the belief that every life has value, the conviction that the strong should protect the weak, not exploit them, the understanding that civilization is measured not by what we take, but by what we give. Her voice grew stronger. We were alone once. We climbed from the darkness of our own history without anyone to help us. We made every mistake a species can make. We nearly destroyed ourselves more than once, but we survived, and we learned, and we remember what it felt like to be alone and afraid and forgotten. She looked at. No one in this compact will ever feel that way again. That is our promise. That is what the compact stands for. The session continued with practical matters, trade agreements and patrol routes and resource sharing. The work of building something new was not glamorous. It was meetings and compromises and endless details. But it was real work and it mattered. After the session ended, found standing at an observation window. She was looking down at Nu, watching the lights of cities beginning to appear on the night side. "A year ago I did not believe you," said. "When you told me to give you 3 days, I thought you were just being kind. I thought you were offering false hope to a dying species." Nodded. "I know, I saw it in your eyes." "I was wrong," said. "I have never been more grateful to be wrong about anything in my life." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the planet turn below them. "What made you do it?" asked. "When the conquered refused us, why did humanity say yes? You had nothing to gain. You risked your ships and your people for strangers." Thought about the question for a long moment. "Do you know what I remember most about that day at the Concord? It wasn't the votes against you. It wasn't the excuses. It was the way the delegates walked out afterward. They were already talking about other things. Trade deals and border disputes and dinner reservations. Your entire species was facing extinction, and they were thinking about dinner." She turned to face him. "I looked at that and I thought, this is wrong. Not complicated, not difficult to understand, just wrong. And I realized that if we didn't do something, if we just walked out like everyone else, then we would become like them. We would learn to look away. We would learn to calculate risk and reward while people died." Her eyes were fierce. "I refuse to let that happen. I refuse to let humanity become another species that watches and does nothing. So I made a promise I wasn't sure we could keep. And then I went home and convinced a planet to keep it anyway." Was quiet for a long time. "Humans have a word," he said finally. "Family. We learned it from your crews during the evacuation. They used it often. They called each other family. They called us family." "It means people who belong to each other," said. "People who take care of each other no matter what." "Yes," said. "I think we understand now. They did not have this word before. We had words for clan and tribe and nation. But family is different. Family is not about blood or territory. Family is about choice." He reached out and took his hand, just as she had taken his a year ago. "The compact is a family now. They have chosen. Humanity has chosen. And the forgotten species of this galaxy have chosen. We are not alone anymore. None of us are alone." Below them, on the surface of Nu, a small ceremony was taking place. A young girl was placing flowers at a memorial. The memorial bore a simple inscription, "Captain, Rising Star." She gave everything so that others might live. The girl's grandmother stood beside her. She had been on the Rising Star during that final evacuation. She had been one of the 12,000 saved by sacrifice. "The humans have another word," the grandmother said to the child. "Hero. It means someone who does brave things to help others." The girl looked at the memorial. Was she a hero? "Yes," the grandmother said, "she was, and we will never forget her." Across the galaxy, the conquered continued as it always had. The great powers still traded and competed and calculated. They still believed that the universe belonged to the strong. But in a quiet corner of space, something new was growing. A compact of species who had chosen each other. A family of the forgotten who would never forget. a promise kept by humans who had once been strangers. And in the darkness between the stars, hope was spreading, one species at a time, one choice at a time, one act of compassion at a time. The galaxy had turned away, but humanity had not, and nothing would ever be the same again.